The diner owner fed the truck drivers stranded in the storm. 2 days later, a long line of big rigs appeared.
Hello everyone. Enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch.
Denver, January. The wind came howling down from the Rocky Mountains, making the air as sharp as a knife, blanketing Interstate I-70 in thick layers of snow. It was the harshest winter in over a decade. News broadcasts issued constant high-level warnings, urging people not to travel unless absolutely necessary. But for those who made their living on long-haul routes, such warnings were nothing more than bedtime stories. Emma Wilson stood behind the counter of a small diner named The Shelter, one of the last pit stops before leaving Denver and heading up into the mountains. She was 42, with deep, sorrowful black eyes. A gray wool scarf wrapped around her neck did nothing to hide the exhaustion etched into her gaunt face. 12 years ago, her husband, James, had died in a trucking accident on this very road. Since then, Emma had run the shelter alone, cook, server, part-time repairwoman when a pipe leaked or the tin roof blew loose. A small radio crackled behind the counter. Emergency announcement, red level snowstorm. Interstate I-70 closed from mile marker 18. All vehicles currently on the road should seek the nearest available shelter. She turned off the radio, eyes wide with alarm as she stared at the thick snow coating the windowpane. Outside, the wind howled like a wild beast loose on a frozen wasteland. Just 15 minutes later, the blaring of truck horns erupted outside the diner. A convoy of nearly 20 trucks pulled over one by one. Drivers jumped down from their cabs, waving frantically, shouting to each other in accents from all over the country. A tall man wearing a heavy forest green overcoat came in first, his face flushed red from the cold. His name was John Smith, a middle-aged trucker from San Diego, and he was the first to speak. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, is there anywhere here we can wait out the storm? The highway's completely shut down. We can't go any further." Emma's eyes widened. She looked at John, then at the door, where dozens of men stood huddled in the swirling snow. Their faces, weary and dusted with frost and road grime, radiated desperate need. "Come in," she said, breathing hard. "All of you, come in before the snow gets worse." John shouted back toward the trucks. "She's letting us in, everyone, go." Within minutes, over 18 drivers piled into the diner, crowding every corner of the small space. Their muddy, snow-covered boots stained the old wooden floor. They squeezed into worn-down booths, their shoulders soaked from melting snow. Some names were called out, like Michael Johnson, a young trucker from Tucson who bowed his head in heartfelt thanks. Others remained silent, as if Emma's kindness was something they were owed. She glanced at the small kitchen, then back at the crowd. 3 pots of vegetable soup left, she thought. 1 large canister of clean water. Blankets. She glanced at the linen cabinet in the corner. Probably only enough for half of them. "Everyone, please listen to me." Emma stepped out to the center of the diner, her voice trembling slightly. "I'll cook everything I've got left. It's not much, but it'll warm you up. I don't have many blankets, I'll divide them among you in groups. But please stay calm. I'm alone here. If everyone shouts at once, I can't manage." John nodded and turned to the group. "You heard her. This lady's saving our asses. Help her out." Some stood up and began helping Emma, boiling water, peeling vegetables. In the kitchen, the scent of celery, onions, and fried garlic began to drift through the room, softening the cold that crept through the brick walls. "Mrs. Emma, can I wash these carrots?" David Brown, a salt and pepper-haired trucker from San Diego, asked as he picked up a bunch. "Thanks. I really need the help," she replied with a weak smile. But not everyone had such goodwill. A man leaned against the doorway, eyes scanning the room with detached indifference. He wore a leather jacket, a black beanie, and his gaze was as sharp as a blade. Joseph Miller, 45, a trucker from El Paso, didn't bother to hide his displeasure. He muttered under his breath. A lonely old woman in a rundown diner letting all of us in. Feels like a scene from some corny movie. John overheard and turned around. What was that? Joseph sneered. Just saying the truth. We should have found somewhere better. Somewhere with actual heat, at least. The roads are shut. Where else do you expect to go? You think you're in a position to be picky when someone opens their doors in an emergency? Joseph shrugged and said nothing more, but his eyes didn't leave Emma as she hunched over the stove, stirring soup. That night, they all ate from the last few bowls of hot soup Emma had made. A few men smacked their lips in complaint over the lack of salt. Joseph slammed his spoon onto the table, sending droplets flying. I've eaten at truck stops 100 times better than this dump. Emma heard him but said nothing. She bit her lip and turned away, gripping the ladle tightly. Every complaint was a stab to her dignity. They're cold, they're hungry, they don't mean it, she told herself. But something inside her had begun to crack. John came closer and whispered. Don't let it get to you. Not everyone knows how to be grateful. Emma nodded faintly and forced a smile. But inside, the anxiety settled deeper thick as the snow building outside. Late into the night, when the wind crept through every gap in the walls, Emma moved quietly through the room, handing out the remaining blankets. She stooped and gently covered the oldest man, Daniel Davis, 61, whose teeth chattered non-stop. Daniel opened his eyes in surprise. You're still thinking about me? After a day like this? Emma answered softly. Because I know, if my husband were still alive, this is what he would have done. Outside, the snow fell like salt on a world rotting with selfishness. And inside the shelter, Emma fought to keep alive a flickering flame of kindness, trembling like a dying oil lamp. By the time dawn barely broke, snow had come down again. The ice was so thick it took 3 men to force open the diner's front door just to let in fresh air. Emma sat curled in a chair, clutching a lukewarm cup of tea, dark circles under her eyes from lack of sleep. Only one night had passed, yet the small diner had become an impromptu shelter where empathy was quickly giving way to frustration. Joseph Miller stood in the middle of the room, holding a piece of paper and rapping on a table. I've made a list of what our group needs. Thick soup, hot water, 2 loaves of fresh bread per person. And if you've got coffee, I want Hawaiian. The whole room fell silent for a moment. Are you serious? John frowned. We're stranded. Emma gave everyone an equal share. Joseph crossed his arms, voice dripping with disdain. The issue is that share wasn't adequate. She thinks a few bowls of bland soup and 3 ratty blankets are enough. I have money. I'm asking for fair service. Or does this place not take paying customers? Emma stepped forward, voice gentle but firm. This is no longer a business, sir. This is an emergency shelter. I'm doing everything I can to help people survive the night. Joseph laughed scornfully. A lone old lady in a half-collapsed diner calling herself a rescuer? Give me a break. You're playing the saint to fish for praise. If you were really generous, why not offer us private rooms? Some of the truckers looked at each other but said nothing. Emma froze for a moment, then replied calmly. I don't have private rooms. I sleep on the kitchen floor, just like everyone else. Joseph smirked. Exactly. You're not equipped to help us. You should have said that from the start. I would have looked elsewhere. John stood up, eyes burning. If there's somewhere else, go. No one's stopping you. Thanks. But I'm not dumb enough to walk out in a blizzard over some petty squabble. I'm just pointing out if someone organized this better, we wouldn't be stuck living like this. Some younger truckers looked down at their boots. David Brown whispered to Daniel. I'm getting worried. That guy's not gonna stop at words. Daniel sighed. In situations like this, people show who they really are. That's what's scary. That afternoon, Emma brought out the last pot of soup. She'd thinned it out in hopes of making it stretch for everyone. But as she stepped out, Joseph snatched the ladle from her hands. "Let me see this so-called best effort of yours." He scooped himself a full bowl and sat down to eat alone. No one else had been served yet, but he didn't care. After finishing, he tossed the ladle onto the table, sending broth flying. Watery. Not a single piece of meat. Next time, learn how to cook before calling yourself a relief worker. Emma bit her lip. Her cheeks flushed red not from the cold, but from rage she tried to suppress. Still, she kept serving soup, handing out portions one by one. John, Michael, and David watched Joseph in silence, their expressions dark but saying nothing. As evening fell and the wind howled louder, Emma was stoking the wood stove when a voice called out. "Mrs. Emma." She turned to see Olivia Anderson, the only female driver in the group, approaching in a thick coat. "I won't be eating my soup portion," Olivia said. "Save it for someone who needs it more. I've got some protein bars in my truck. I'll manage." "But you need to stay warm too, Olivia." Olivia shook her head. "You're the only one here thinking about others. I don't want you collapsing before the storm passes." Emma paused. Something warm flickered inside her chest. But almost instantly, Joseph's voice rang out. "Olivia, you're a woman, you need your strength. Don't pretend to be a damn hero." Olivia turned back, her eyes icy cold. "Don't tell me how to live." Night fell quickly, like a dark blanket smothering growing fear. Emma had to burn the last 2 bundles of firewood to keep everyone warm. She did a mental tally, enough clean water for 2 more days. Rice and noodles wouldn't last another full meal. No electricity. No resupply. Just ice and snow and eyes growing sharper, more judgmental. While she was mopping the floor, a heavy hand landed on her shoulder, making her flinch. It was Joseph. "I have a solution," he whispered. "Open the back storeroom. I'm sure there's inventory left, rations, wine, preserves. Let me and a few trustworthy men take stock. We'll distribute it more efficiently." "No," Emma stepped back. "That storeroom is sealed. There's nothing of value left." "I don't believe you," Joseph narrowed his eyes. "And if you don't cooperate, I fear some people might not make it through tomorrow. When that happens, I can't say what they'll do." "Are you threatening me?" Her voice trembled. Joseph gave a dry laugh. "No, just stating facts." That night, as most people drifted off to sleep, John and David took turns watching near the front door. Joseph, meanwhile, quietly slipped into a corner, eyes glinting with calculation. Whispered exchanges between him and 3 other truckers, Matthew, Andrew, and Christopher, became more frequent, especially when Emma was out of sight. David murmured to John. "That guy's bad news. I saw him pointing at the storeroom this morning." John nodded. "I'll sleep right beside it tonight. If anything happens, I'll wake her." But could one man stop the greed of a group? Emma didn't know. All she knew was that something inside her was fracturing. Every act of kindness seemed to awaken a new, darker wave underneath. The night thickened. Snow piled high on the tin roof until it groaned under the weight. Emma lay curled behind the kitchen, her cracked hands clutching each other for warmth. The last flickering firelight danced like a dying soul in the black silence. Before sunrise, a loud crash sounded behind the building. A sharp shatter rang out, followed by the door being flung open amidst howling wind. John bolted upright, knocked over the chair he was guarding with, and ran to the storeroom. But it was already too late. The kitchen window was shattered, shards of glass scattered across the snow. Inside, flashlight beams swept over food crates. Joseph stood at the center, rummaging like a shopper at a supermarket. Beside him were Matthew, Christopher, and Andrew, all hastily loading remaining supplies onto a cart. John shouted. What the hell are you doing? Joseph turned around, calm as ever. Securing what's left. You want to freeze out here? That food belongs to Emma. She kept it so it could be shared fairly. You don't have the right. Her version of fair won't help anyone survive. We're just being realistic. David arrived just then and took in the chaos. A clean water barrel cracked open, flooding the floor, ripped rice bags scattered, frozen goods lying useless without electricity. You realize ruining this food is like killing us with your own hands? David said, furious. Joseph shrugged. Better than letting one old woman decide everyone's fate. Emma arrived too, hands trembling as she saw the broken door, the wrecked storeroom, water gushing everywhere. What have you done? Her voice broke. I told you, there wasn't enough for everyone, but I was going to figure something out. Joseph turned to her, cold and blunt. Enough. You're too weak to lead in a crisis. This isn't some leadership contest. This is survival, this is humanity. John yelled. Joseph stepped forward and shoved Emma hard. She stumbled, slipped on the ice, and fell backward, her shoulder slamming into the floor. A jolt of pain shot down her spine, and she let out a soft moan, gripping the doorframe to sit up. No one helped her. No one. Only a few young truckers looked on, but quickly turned away, lowering their heads as if it hadn't happened. Daniel, old and coughing in the corner, dared not interfere. David and John tried to step forward, but Joseph's group blocked the way, guarding the supplies like animals over a carcass. Emma pushed herself up with both hands, her lips pale from cold and shock. She looked around at the ransacked storeroom and whispered with trembling voice. I trusted you. I gave you shelter, food, warmth, and in return, you robbed me blind. Andrew turned, saying flatly. If it wasn't us, it'd be someone else. The strong survive. You ungrateful bastard. John shouted. But no one moved. The silence was crushing. Not a single hand reached out to help Emma stand. That entire day, the mood in the diner was suffocating. Joseph and his group claimed the warmest corner, lit a fire with the firewood they gathered from the storeroom, and cooked soup from what they stole, eating alone, sharing nothing. The remaining truckers kept quiet, heads down. The room split into two worlds, those who had, and those who watched from the cold. Emma barely spoke. She quietly cleaned the blood from a scrape on her hand, then swept the kitchen like always. Her clothes were soaked, her old wool scarf offered no warmth. John silently handed her his coat, but she shook her head. You need to stay warm, Emma, John said. I'm not cold because of the wind, John. I'm cold because my heart's been cut to pieces. Later, Olivia approached and placed a protein bar on the kitchen counter. I didn't eat this. Keep it. Save it for yourself. The night will be long. You need it more than I do. Emma clenched her fists and finally accepted the small gift, as if it were the last spark of warmth in an ever-darkening night. The second night passed in silence. No chatter. No clinking of bowls. Just wind howling, groans from those growing ill, and vacant eyes from the directionless. David looked around and whispered to Daniel. Joseph has divided everyone. Emma has nothing left. If the storm doesn't end, we'll die slowly of fear and silence. Daniel shook his head. No. We die because we turned away when evil started to spread. Around midnight, Joseph stood with a flashlight and called for Matthew and Andrew. They slipped outside and circled around to the small back room where Emma slept. John followed quietly, but when he arrived, the door was already ajar. Their flashlights flickered through the room. Joseph crouched and reached under the bed. Moments later, he pulled out a rusted tin box. Opening it, he let out a whistle. Her savings. Matthew chuckled. She really thought she could hide it from us. Beside the bed, a small electric heater had been unplugged. its cord hastily stuffed into a bag. The blankets had been taken too. As they stepped outside, John blocked their path. Put it back. Now. Joseph raised an eyebrow. Get out of the way, John. Can't you see how things are? John clenched his fists. You're a thief. Joseph tilted his head, voice chilling. No. I just adapt quickly to reality. He shoved John aside and disappeared into the snowstorm. The next morning, Emma woke up in an empty room. No blankets. No heater. No savings box. Her back ached from sleeping on the stone-cold floor. She stumbled out, trembling, and saw Joseph's group still lounging by the fire, sipping hot coffee. A scrap of paper was taped to her door. Sloppily scribbled words. Thanks to these things, we survived. You're on your own now. Emma held the note, her fingers trembling. No one asked if she was okay. No one spoke to her. She was like a ghost in the very diner she had built from love and memory with her husband. John walked over, eyes filled with guilt. I'm sorry. I couldn't stop them. It's not your fault, Emma whispered. It's mine. For believing kindness could save anyone. John wanted to reply, but only lowered his head. As Joseph sipped coffee beside the fire, Emma sat down in the cold corner of the kitchen, clutching Olivia's protein bar like it was the last ember of humanity. Outside, snow still fell. The third day began with a faint groan from a corner of the diner. Everyone turned to see Joshua Clark, a young trucker from Reno, doubled over, clutching his stomach, sweat pouring down his face despite the sub-zero weather. Ah, it hurts, my stomach. Olivia rushed over and knelt beside him. Joshua. What's wrong? I don't know, ever since I ate the soup yesterday, it's been getting worse. John hurried over, touching Joshua's forehead, then turned to Emma, who was rummaging through her personal first aid kit. High fever. It's either severe chills or mild food poisoning. Joseph stepped away from his fire, arms crossed, voice slow and judge-like. Food poisoning, huh? Not surprised. With the kind of meals we've been forced to eat, that was bound to happen. What do you mean by that? John stared at him. Joseph glanced at Emma, who was fumbling through her medicine kit, then spoke up, loudly enough for everyone to hear. I mean, maybe the owner of this diner, out of desperation or stinginess, cooked us something that wasn't exactly safe. Emma looked up, stunned. Are you saying I poisoned you? No one said that word, Joseph smirked. I'm just raising a question I think we all should consider. Who controls the storeroom? Who decides what gets served? Who cooks? Who distributes it? Olivia stood up, furious. She gave us shelter. She shared the last of her supplies to cook for us. And now you dare to accuse her? Joseph shrugged. We're not talking about kindness. We're talking about responsibility. If someone distributes food but can't ensure its quality, they should be held accountable. Nothing was spoiled. Emma cried, her hands trembling. I checked every bag, every can. Joshua just ate too much after starving for 2 days. David jumped in. That's right. I saw him eat 3 bowls yesterday. His stomach just wasn't ready. But Joseph was quicker. He turned to the murmuring crowd, raising his voice a notch. The problem is, we don't know. No one else has been allowed in the kitchen. No one has been allowed to inspect the storeroom. I'm not claiming anything outright, but if this continues, the next one to collapse could be me, or you, or my daughter back home waiting for money to be sent. Andrew added. The soup did smell a little strange yesterday. Matthew nodded. And the color was off, not like the first batch. John shook with rage. Are you even human? Just outright lies. Joseph gave a cold laugh, then pulled out his phone and turned on the camera. I just want to document what's happening here. If someone in our group dies, there should be proof that we saw the signs." He pointed the camera directly at Emma's face, now pale from shock. "Do you have anything you'd like to say to everyone?" I never," Emma stammered. Joseph turned the camera to Joshua, still curled up in pain. "This kid is living proof. Violent stomach pain after eating food prepared solely by one person. If this were a city restaurant, it would have been shut down on the first night by health inspectors." "Enough!" Olivia screamed. "You're attacking a lone woman in the middle of a snowstorm. Do you even know what shame is?" But the other truckers, those who once laughed and chatted when they first entered, remained silent. Some exchanged glances. Others looked down. No one stood up for Emma. No one dared. Joseph's pressure was too heavy. John turned to David. "We have to do something. We can't let this go on." David bit his lip. "If we push back, they'll lock the storeroom and hide supplies. We've got more nights ahead. And, there's no telling if the authorities will even reach us in time." Emma stood in the very diner she had built with her husband James, now feeling like a defendant in a lawless trial. The bricks on the walls, the old chairs, the photos with James, now they all seemed to judge her. Joseph turned off the camera and pulled out a scrap of paper. He scribbled a few lines and then raised his voice. "I'll send this video to the Colorado State Patrol as soon as we have a signal. I'll list every witness here. If I die or any of us dies, I want it to be clear who was responsible." "That's slander," Emma cried out, tears welling up. Joseph replied coldly. "No one's slandering anyone. We're just taking precautions." The room buzzed with whispers. A few nodded. Some looked at Emma with doubt. Olivia stepped closer, whispering, "You have to stay strong. Don't let them see you fall." Emma gave a bitter smile. She sat down on the nearest chair, still clutching her cold teacup, eyes staring out the fogged window. The snow no longer fell gently. Now it came down like white arrows, piercing through what fragile trust she had left. By late afternoon, Joshua's fever had begun to break after being bundled in blankets and given the last fever-reducing pill Emma had. But Joseph wasn't done. "He just got lucky," he whispered to Matthew. "Otherwise, we'd have had a reason to kick that woman out already." "Should we make it clearer?" Matthew asked. Joseph shook his head. "No need to rush. Just keep planting doubt. Alone in a crowd full of resentment, she'll collapse on her own." John, sitting only a few feet away, had overheard everything. He turned to David. "We have to turn this around. Emma can't take much more." David nodded grimly. "But if we act too soon, we'll lose what little trust remains from the rest." Night came. Emma quietly washed the dishes no one helped with. Her hands were calloused, her wrist still swollen from the fall the other day. She hadn't rested a single hour since letting them in. She sat alone in the cold kitchen corner, wrapping the worn scarf around herself, eyes blankly staring at the old wine shelf where she once displayed James' favorite bottles. Now, only dust and the hammering echo of accusations. The wind hissed through the cracks in the door, mimicking the words hurled at her. Rotten soup. Poisoning. Just taking precautions. She closed her eyes not from sleep, but because she was too exhausted to cry anymore. The fourth night began in utter silence. No murmuring voices. No smell of smoke from cooking fires. Not even the shifting glances between right and wrong. Only a skin-cutting cold seeping into every wall, every crack of the shelter. Emma lay curled behind the kitchen. The torn wool scarf no longer covered her aching back. Ever since Joseph and his crew took the electric heater and all the blankets, she'd had only the cold stone floor as her bed, and the icy brick wall as her pillow. Hunger gnawed at her belly. Her lips were cracked. She buried her face in her hands. In the dark, no one would see her cry. But frozen tears couldn't soothe the chill in her chest. Around midnight, light footsteps echoed. Emma cracked her eyes open. 3 figures moved quietly along the wall, sneaking toward her room. A thin beam from a flashlight swept across, then quickly shut off. The door, held shut by a simple wooden latch, shuddered as a hand pushed hard against it. In a flash, Joseph, Matthew, and Andrew entered like ghosts. "Quick, daylight's coming," Matthew whispered. Joseph crouched under the bed, feeling through the cracks. A faint click sounded as he opened a hidden panel under the floor. He pulled out another tin box, not money this time, but a small wooden chest containing Emma's last treasures, a wedding photo with James, an old wedding ring, and a few envelopes labeled "unpaid bills." "This is it." Andrew frowned. "No, they're that fabric suitcase," Joseph pointed. Matthew opened it. Inside was a torn envelope. He ripped it open and pulled out a few old US dollar bills, less than $300 in total. "Emma's emergency savings." Joseph sneered. "Enough to make it back to the city if we had a vehicle." "Not bad." "Grab that blanket too," Matthew said, pointing to the last cover Emma had wrapped around herself. "Don't you dare!" John shouted from the hallway. Footsteps thundered closer, but it was too late. Joseph and the others had already gathered the goods and slipped out the back door, where they had quietly removed the lock the day before. John stormed in, flashlight slicing through the empty room. Emma lay on the stone floor, trembling. Even the threadbare scarf was gone. "Emma," he called out, kneeling beside her. "They took everything," she whispered. John immediately wrapped his coat around her shoulders. "I'll get it all back. I swear." "No need," Emma closed her eyes. "They didn't take anything new. They just finished stealing what little I had left." The next morning, faint sunlight filtered through the frosted windows. The snow had eased less than before. Ice had begun to melt along the edges of the glass. But inside the shelter, the cold remained not from temperature, but from the hardening of hearts. Joseph and his gang sat by the fire, cups of coffee in hand taken from the storeroom. From across the room, John watched them like they were another species. He whispered to David. "We can't keep going like this. She's going to die." David looked around. The others still kept their heads down. Only Olivia occasionally glanced toward Emma, who sat slumped against the wall, her face gaunt, her eyes empty, as if her soul had fled. Joseph sipped his coffee and said, "She won't last much longer. It's time she understood that this place isn't for dreamers and morality anymore." "You're a damn animal," John roared. Joseph smirked. "No, I'm a realist." "You're still clinging to movie hero fantasies," Matthew chimed in. "And honestly, if she dies of the cold, that's her own choice. Should have taken better care of her stuff." Olivia slammed the table and stood up. "You won't get away with this. I'll tell the authorities everything." Joseph shrugged. "Go ahead and try. Let's see who they'll believe, your word or the word of the dozen or so others." A few young drivers glanced over, then quickly turned away. John walked over, helped Emma stand, and led her to the small kitchen. "I'll start a fire. Even if it's just the last bundle of wood." "No need, keep it for the others." "No. You're the only one who deserves to be warmed." He lit a small fire, then pulled out his thin blanket, spread it on the floor, and helped Emma sit down. Emma looked at him, her eyes welling up. "I thought kindness was enough to save people. But it's not. It's just something for others to exploit." "No. You were right. It's just, you were too alone." A moment later, Daniel slowly approached. The old man quietly placed a ration bar in Emma's hand. "It's the only one I have left. But you need it more than I do." Emma took it, choking up, unable to speak. Olivia came next. Here's half a bottle of water I hid under the seat. I can't stand this anymore. I don't want to look back and realize I was one of those who turned away. John clenched his fist tightly. Exactly. Tonight, we'll turn the tables. We'll stand in the middle and let Joseph know, kindness isn't meant to be crushed. Emma bit her lip. Hot tears streamed down her cold cheeks. That evening, Joseph sat reading the list of remaining supplies. He rationed them like a camp overseer, gripping the warehouse key tightly. Whenever someone came to ask for an extra piece of bread or some water, he waved them off like swatting a fly. We've already given out the standard portions. If you want more, work for it. No freeloaders here. Emma stood a few steps away, watching silently, her arms wrapped around herself. His words were like nails driven into the memory of her husband, who had dreamed of turning the haven into a warm stopover amidst the cold mountains. That dream was now just a pile of ashes. Joseph turned to her, smirking. What are you thinking? Want to beg for an extra portion? She didn't answer. Or maybe you want us to charitably toss you some more humanity. Dear former owner. John clenched his fists, stepping forward. But Emma raised her hand to stop him. No need. Let him say it all. I want to hear clearly, every last shred of humanity left in his mouth. Joseph burst out laughing. Then listen up, thanks to the things I took from you, at least 10 people in here are still alive. And you? You should take care of yourself before preaching to others about how to live. Emma turned away silently. She didn't respond. Didn't argue. Only her frail, lonely figure disappeared behind the door as the wind howled. And so, the fourth night passed. No blankets. No heater. No dignity. No hope. Only the haven remained a cold, desolate diner, where kindness had been stolen, trust had been twisted, and a woman was barely clinging to the last flicker of warmth in her battered heart. The morning of the 5th day. The first faint rays of sunlight pierced through the grimy, fogged windows of the haven. The howling wind outside had stopped. The snow began to melt, revealing the dark asphalt of Interstate I-70. Old snowflakes fell like ashes, dissolving in the sound of water dripping from the warped tin roof. Olivia was the first to notice the change. She sprang up from the cold floor, ran to the window, and after wiping the foggy glass a few times, exclaimed. The road, there's a vehicle. The road's being cleared. John jumped up, rushing over. A snowplow was slowly clearing the path about 100 meters away. Farther off, a line of yellow flashing lights marked the first vehicles trailing out of the icy region. The diner buzzed with activity. Laughter and cheers erupted, as if there had never been any hostility, coldness, or betrayal. We can leave. Matthew shouted. Home. Back to fireplaces, warm blankets, and grilled meat. Andrew cackled. Only Emma remained still in the corner of the kitchen. Her face was pale, her eyes sunken, her lips cracked from days without enough water or warmth. She said nothing. She didn't look at anyone. An hour later, Interstate I-70 was officially cleared. The drivers headed to their trucks one by one. Some gathered their things, others laughed and chatted as if they'd just left a camping trip rather than days of surviving off the kindness of an exhausted woman. Joseph strode into the diner, slamming his hand on the table like he was issuing orders. Pack up, what are you waiting for? We don't have to sleep in this dump another night. John stood in front of the door, his eyes burning. You're leaving without a word to Emma? Joseph shrugged. I left a thank you note. Earlier. Now I don't think it's necessary. You're a rotten bastard, Miller. Thanks. You're not a priest either, John. Last warning, get out of the way. John clenched his fists but finally stepped aside. He turned away, not wanting to look for another second at the face of the man who embodied raw selfishness. Matthew hauled a large gas canister. Andrew carried 2 remaining water jugs. Another quietly stuffed a few pots into his backpack. No one looked back. No one asked Emma if she wanted to keep anything. Olivia watched the scene, shuddering. "Don't you feel any shame?" No one answered. David walked slowly toward Emma. He bent down, placing a small piece of paper on the table. "I'm sorry. I didn't protect you. My silence killed someone else's kindness. This is my address in San Diego. If you ever need anything, come find me. I owe you a debt I can never repay." Emma didn't speak. She only nodded slightly, her eyes no longer bright. John leaned down, placing the jacket he'd offered her earlier back in her hands. "I'm not leaving with them. I'll wait for the next ride. I can't leave you like this." "No," Emma shook her head faintly. "You need to go. Don't worry about me. I've stayed in this place for half my life. I have nothing left to lose. You still have your faith." "No," she gave a weak smile. "It's that faith that got me here." Olivia hugged Emma tightly. "I believe you'll rise again. There will be people worthy of you, not like the monsters who just passed through." "Thank you, but I'm not sure I want to open my heart again." Olivia pulled a woolen scarf from her backpack. "My mother knitted this. I brought it for the cold, but now I want it to keep you warm. You need it more." "No. I need to know, a part of me stays here. In this place that once held true kindness." By late morning, the convoy of trucks pulled away from the haven. No horns, no waves, no goodbyes. Only the deep tire tracks in the melting snow remained, like long gashes across the weary body of the old diner. Joseph was the last to glance back. He stopped his truck for a few seconds, rolled down the window, and threw out one final jab. "Thanks for the handouts, you fool." John stepped forward, about to charge, but Emma placed her hand on his arm, shaking her head. "Don't waste another second on someone like him. They've taken enough." Joseph's truck roared off, kicking up snow and debris. And then, they all vanished around the foggy bend. The afternoon fell faster than usual. The haven was now desolate. Broken windows. A cold stove. An empty warehouse. On the table, a few coffee stains lingered, mixed with crumbs of stale bread and fragments of shattered trust. Emma sat in silence, her gaze no longer following anything. The wedding photo with James had a torn corner. She quietly picked it up, gently smoothing the cracked glass. In the picture, they smiled radiantly in a Denver spring. She still remembered James saying back then, "We'll create a place where people won't be afraid to knock." Emma laughed, but tears fell. She placed the photo back on the shelf, then looked around. Everything was gone, leaving only an overwhelming emptiness. She shuffled to the front door and opened it. The wind slipped through the broken frame, carrying a final chill of the season. She stepped onto the stone porch, looking at Interstate I-70, the road where she had so often waited for James to return. Now, it was just her. Alone. The diner was no longer warm. No aroma of vegetable soup. No clinking of glasses in the cold night. No one asking, "Mrs. Emma, can I help with anything?" Nothing remained but the sound of the wind. She returned to the kitchen, where the wood stove had long gone cold. In the corner, a small stone jutted out the spot where James had placed the heart-shaped rock he'd found on a San Diego beach during their honeymoon. She bent down, picked it up, and clutched it tightly. Faint light streamed through a cracked window. On the wall, the old clock struck 4:05. Emma sat down, hugging her knees, curling up like a child with nowhere left to hide. Outside, the cold lingered. But in her heart, the chill had seeped into her bones 4 days ago, from the moment she opened the door to strangers, her heart full of hope that kindness would beget kindness. But as it turned out, it wasn't always so. The fifth night, the haven sank into silence. No sound of footsteps. No smell of soup, wood smoke, or damp jackets. Only the musty odor of cold walls, soaked through from days of seeping water. And Emma Wilson, 42 years old, alone, curled up in the dark. She couldn't recall the last time she'd slept through the night. It had probably been over 4 days. Every sleep was broken, pierced by cold, woken by someone demanding more water, fighting over blankets, or shouting in the night that they were hungry. Now, no one called out anymore. No one needed anything from her. And no one had left her anything but dirty boot prints, scraps of paper, and accusations clinging to the walls like indelible stains. Emma sat at the worn-out bar counter, where she used to brew coffee for James every morning. She placed the white porcelain cup on the table. No coffee, just a bit of cold water she'd managed to collect from melted snow. Each sip of the icy water felt like it was cutting into her parched throat. The wedding photo on the wall hung crooked. The frame was cracked on one side from a collision a few days earlier, when Andrew, fighting over a pot of soup, had swung his arm and hit it. She didn't bother fixing it. Let it stay crooked, just like her heart. The wind picked up again. Emma pulled Olivia's shawl tighter around her, the only thing left that still held a trace of human warmth. She closed her eyes, straining to hear any sound from the road, but there was only silence. No cars. No horns. No voices. Denver was far away, and the world seemed to have forgotten that a small diner called the Haven had ever existed here. Near midnight, Emma, half dreaming, heard a metallic clatter from outside. She opened her eyes. Rats? Or the wind knocking over a trash can? She forced herself up and stepped out to the front porch. The snow had almost melted, leaving only a few scattered patches of ice. The dim moonlight illuminated the wooden table in the yard, where John used to sit peeling vegetables to help her. The chair there was overturned. A small sparrow lay dead on the ground, its wings spread, eyes shut tight. Emma bent down, picked up the bird, her hands trembling. It was light as a feather. Light as something that had just been broken. She cradled it in her hands, stepped farther out, and dug a small hole in the remaining snow to bury it. "At least, you got a better ending than I will, didn't you?" she whispered. She turned back to close the door but froze. Far off on the highway, a tiny speck of light flickered. Was it a car's headlight? Or just an illusion? She squinted, her hand gripping the doorframe tightly. The speck grew clearer. It was a headlight. A truck. No, 2. Then 3. 4. A long line of trucks crawled slowly along I-70, silent as spirits rising from a dream. Impossible. Who would come back? She stepped back, her heart pounding in her chest. With each turn of the wheels drawing closer, her fear grew. Was it Joseph's crew returning? Someone coming to steal more? No. There was nothing left to steal. They'd only find a walking corpse. The first truck stopped in front of the Haven. The door opened. A man stepped out. A long indigo coat with a strange logo on the chest, National Freight Trans League FNT. He took off his sunglasses, revealing a tanned, weathered face. Graying hair, a calm demeanor. When he spoke, his voice rang out like a strange yet familiar melody. "Hello. Are you Emma Wilson?" She took another step back, hesitating. "Yes. I am, but I'm sorry, I'm not taking customers. I'm Ethan Taylor, president of the National Drivers League. We heard about what you did last week." "Heard about it?" "Yes. One of our young drivers, Olivia Anderson, who stayed here, reported the whole thing. She recorded videos, audio, and sent an urgent message to our headquarters as soon as she left." Emma stood stunned. Ethan stepped forward, bowing his head not in greeting, but as if in apology. On behalf of over 400 drivers across the country, I'm here to thank you. Emma still couldn't find words. The doors of the trucks behind him opened one by one. People stepped out, all wearing reflective uniforms embroidered with FNT. They carried crates, water jugs, wood, shovels, medical kits, and coils of electrical wire. A group walked straight into the diner without asking, starting to clean up. "Wait, please, what are you all doing?" Ethan looked at her and smiled. "We're here to help you stand back up. No one has the right to let someone like you fall because of kindness." Emma clutched the door as if she might collapse. Tears came before she could stop them. I don't need anything anymore. I've lost everything." Ethan spoke slowly. "You haven't lost anything, Emma. You still have what this world lacks, compassion. And we need people like you to keep existing." A young man stepped out from the third truck, setting down a large box before running over to Emma. He bowed his head and opened the box. Inside were bags of rice, milk, canned fish, dry bread, and a white envelope. "I'm Alexander Harris, son of a woman who saved people during a blizzard in Reno in 1996. When I heard your story, I thought of my mother. And I thought I couldn't stand by and do nothing." He handed her the envelope. Her trembling hands opened it. Inside was a stack of cash and a handwritten letter. Ethan said softly, "This is a donation from the entire FN crew. Over 400 people, each contributing a small part. It's not compensation, it's gratitude." Emma broke down sobbing. Not for the money. Not for the food. But because, for the first time in 5 dark days, she knew she wasn't alone. That night, the haven glowed with light. A generator, powered by fuel from the trucks, hummed steadily. Broken windows were replaced. The kitchen was relit. Stains on the walls were scrubbed clean. In the kitchen, Emma stood in the middle of the freshly cleaned room. Ethan approached, holding a steaming mug of tea. "Maybe no one has ever saved as many people as you have. And been treated as badly as you have. I used to think kindness was foolish. No. It just hadn't met the right people to see it." She looked up at him, her lips trembling. "I don't know what to say." Ethan gently touched her shoulder. "You don't need to say anything. From now on, we'll take care of the rest." Emma stood still on the porch, the truck headlights shining on her like sunlight on a tree withered through winter. Warmth spread slowly, but her feet hadn't yet moved. She'd never imagined a day when she'd be welcomed like this, with kindness, with respect, with gratitude. Seeing her dazed expression, Ethan spoke gently. "Don't be uneasy. Just stand there. We'll handle everything else." A burly driver ran up, carrying 2 sacks of firewood, his voice booming. "Miss Emma, quick question, is the wood stove out back still working?" Emma blinked, stammering. It still works. But the chimney's a bit clogged." "No problem," he laughed heartily. "I've fixed fireplaces for whole restaurants in Cleveland. I'll take care of it." Another group entered the diner, clearing broken tables and chairs, sweeping away snow still clinging to the floor. A driver named Benjamin Lewis carefully gathered the shattered pieces of the wedding photo from the wall, cleaned the glass, pieced together the corners, and, with teary eyes, handed it to Emma. "This picture, it's still more intact than a lot of people I've known." Emma looked at the photo, tears spilling over. She couldn't speak. She just pressed her hand to her heart. Ethan stepped closer, opening his phone. The screen displayed a string of messages, videos, and notes. He held it up. "This is everything Olivia sent to headquarters. Including the recording of Joseph threatening you, footage of the looting, and statements from John, David, and even Daniel. We've sent copies to the Colorado State Patrol." "Colorado State Patrol, really? They've opened an investigation." That group of drivers could face charges for theft, assault, and intentional defamation. One by one, they'll have to answer. Joseph Miller, in particular, is flagged. His file already has red marks from prior internal scandals. Emma sank into a chair, covering her face. I can't believe, after everything, someone standing up for me. Ethan sat beside her. Not everyone is ungrateful, Emma. You need to know, what you did wasn't meaningless. It touched the conscience of decent people who seemed lost in this world. A young driver, Samuel, approached cautiously, placing a small box in her hands. This is from my mom. She's a nurse, saw loneliness like yours, and told me, if you meet someone like that, give them a hug for me. Emma opened the box. Inside was a floral embroidered handkerchief and a small handwritten note. The world may not be fair, but each of us can make it kinder. Thank you for not letting the fire go out. She cried. Not sobbing, but the kind of cry that bursts from someone who finally believes they were right despite the world's mockery. By dawn, the haven felt strangely cozy. The windows were fixed. The fireplace glowed red. The kitchen smelled of onions, garlic, and fragrant vegetable soup. The drivers put up a temporary sign outside the diner, with bold letters. The haven where we begin again. John returned from Denver, where he'd just finished his first testimony with the Colorado State Patrol. He burst into the diner like family. Emma. I've got news. What is it? They've summoned Joseph. And they're reviewing criminal charges. Olivia and David agreed to testify as key witnesses. Matthew and Andrew have been called too. The Colorado State Patrol asked me to send more evidence. I'm printing the video Ethan brought. Ethan nodded in confirmation. John continued. They won't get away. This time, it's not a passing breeze. It's real justice. Emma gripped John's hand, like holding onto a door that had just been reopened. I was afraid justice was just a dream. No, Emma. Your dream woke up hundreds of people. Now it's their turn to give you reality. That afternoon, the trucks lined up in front of the haven. Not to leave but to stay. Ethan spoke loudly to the crowd. Starting today, the haven will be an official stop for the National Drivers League. Every driver passing through I-70 will stop here, to refuel, to share stories, to give thanks. A round of applause erupted. Someone shouted. The haven forever. Another voice called out. Emma. She stood in the middle of the diner, her face flushed with emotion. Every eye was on her. No one remembered the scene of her being falsely accused, pushed down, or robbed blind. There was only a resilient woman who had risen from the blizzard, with kindness that had been twisted yet refused to break. Daniel, the old driver who had once turned away while Joseph acted, approached with a cane, holding a small envelope. He gently handed it to Emma. I stayed silent when I shouldn't have. This is my pension for the month. I don't need fancy meals anymore, but I need to know I've done right. Emma clasped his hand, saying nothing. Her eyes had already forgiven him. The afternoon buzzed like a festival. Some fixed the plumbing, others installed an extra heater, some painted a new sign, and others cut fabric for curtains to hang at the windows. Emma was seated in a chair, holding a mug of tea, doing nothing but occasionally smiling and shaking her head when someone asked, "Ma'am, do you need anything?" Benjamin came over and whispered. You know, we'd like to ask your permission to recreate your wedding photo. I know an artist who does incredibly lifelike sketches. Would you be okay with that? Recreate it? Yes. I think it deserves to be whole again. Just like your heart. Emma smiled, the first full smile in days. Thank you. Thank you all, for giving me back myself. As dusk fell, Ethan stood up, looking out toward the road. Someone's coming. A white Colorado State Patrol vehicle pulled up and stopped in front of the diner. Two officers stepped out, holding a folder and a summons. Ethan turned to Emma. "If you want, you can sign here to confirm the charges against Joseph and his crew. Or, we and the other witnesses can continue representing you." Emma took the pen, her gaze steady. "No. I want to sign. I want my name tied to reclaiming honor not just for me, but for everyone who's been betrayed for believing in what's right." She signed. Cleanly, boldly, without trembling. A week later, the name, The Haven, appeared constantly in local news, then spread nationwide. The media called it the story of unyielding kindness amid the snow, where a lone woman had sheltered nearly 24 stranded people, was betrayed, but was ultimately upheld by an entire community. Reporters flocked to interview Emma. But she declined them all. "I don't want fame," she told Ethan Taylor one evening by the wood stove. "I just want this diner to live on as its name suggests." Ethan smiled, handing her a stack of papers. "Then you need to see this. This is the official registration. The Haven is now stop number 23 in the FN support system. Drivers passing through I-70 are encouraged to stop here, get health checks, restock supplies, and rest. So, from now on, they'll stop by, regularly." "Exactly. You're not alone anymore, Emma." The next morning, a new convoy pulled up in front of the diner. Over 20 people stepped out, including some who had heard Emma's story over trucker radio. A middle-aged man approached, shaking her hand firmly. "I'm Jacob Walker, running the Chicago to Los Angeles route. I'm only stopping for a few minutes, but my wife made me come. She said, if you don't say hi to Emma, don't bother coming home." The whole diner burst into laughter. Emma blushed, chuckling for the first time that day. "Well then, Jacob, come in for some soup." Another young driver ran up. "Ma'am. I just got my license, this is my first run. My dad kept talking about you, so I had to come thank you in person." "What's your name?" "Noah Adams, ma'am." "Noah, then today you'll learn our specialty here, Strangers Welcome Soup." Meanwhile, at the Colorado State Patrol headquarters, the investigation into the group of drivers led by Joseph Miller was entering the preliminary trial phase. Joseph sat with his head bowed, his face pale. Behind him, a screen played the video of him coldly shoving Emma down, his slanderous words, the recording of him laughing as he stole the heater, and the complicit actions confirmed by the testimonies of John, Olivia, David, and even Daniel. The judge looked at him, voice stern. "Mr. Joseph Miller, the court has received comprehensive evidence from over 7 independent witnesses, along with videos, recordings, and victim confirmations. Do you have anything to say?" Joseph stammered. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just wanted to survive." The judge lightly tapped the gavel. "But you survived by trampling others. And this court cannot allow that to be seen as normal." At the same time, at the Haven, Emma received a package with a red seal from the Colorado State Patrol. She opened it, finding a letter with an official seal and the following. "Joseph Miller has been sentenced to 2 years in prison for theft and intentional harm during an emergency situation. Accomplices have been banned from the transportation industry for periods ranging from 1 to 3 years." Emma sat quietly for a moment. John came over, asking softly, "You okay?" "I'm not happy, or gloating. But you feel relieved, don't you?" "I just feel like justice has finally spoken." Olivia ran out from the kitchen. New guests. They brought more roofing materials. This time from Tucson. Emma stood, adjusting her shawl. She stepped to the door, looking at the warm, unfamiliar faces. Some carried wood, others paint, and some just stopped to hug her before leaving. As if the Haven were a way station for faith. 2 weeks later, the diner had transformed. A new red-tiled roof gleamed. The wooden door frames were carved with a heart and the word, "Welcome." On the wall, next to the restored wedding photo, hung a large framed picture of Emma standing among the FN drivers, her eyes radiant. A new sign was mounted on the store front. "The Haven, no one stands alone in the blizzard." That afternoon, a group of local school children visited the diner as part of a kindness education program. Their teacher, Isabella Thomas, led the way, smiling. "Kids, this is Miss Emma, the person you learned about in the Hero of Kindness lesson. Any questions?" A little girl raised her hand. "Miss, why did you keep helping strangers after they hurt you?" Emma knelt down, holding the girl's hand. "Because if I stopped doing good just because of a few bad people, it'd be like letting the bad guys win forever." A boy piped up. "So, did the bad guys get caught?" John, standing nearby, laughed. "They did. And the good guys are still here with Miss Emma." The kids clapped wildly. Emma said nothing more, just smiled, a smile free of tears, filled only with light. Night fell. The Haven was serene. A few trucks remained parked out front. Emma sat by the window, holding a mug of chamomile tea, gazing into the distance. John came over, silent for a moment before asking, "Have you ever thought about selling this place?" "Yes. The night Joseph pushed me to the floor. I thought, that's enough. And now? Now. I feel like I've never even started." "Started?" "Before, I just ran a diner. Now, I'm running a haven for people ready to give up. Understand?" John nodded. "I do. And I think James, wherever he is, understands too." Emma fell silent. A gentle breeze passed, carrying the scent of the wood stove, vegetable soup, and fresh timber. She looked up at the sky, whispering, "I'm still keeping my promise." The story of Emma Wilson teaches us that kindness is never in vain, even when betrayed, trampled, or misunderstood. In a world full of selfishness and pragmatism, kindness still has the power to stir consciences, ignite unity, and uphold justice. When one person dares to stand for what's right, they not only save themselves but inspire an entire community. The warm ending proves that no matter how small, light can still dispel darkness.
If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.